Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Addiction never ceases to stake its claim on the lives of young Iowans. Today, we are going to tell the story of Tanner Blake Moore. His mom, Lisa, is here to tell his story. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Peter.
Lisa, it's an act of bravery to be willing to come out and share with people the story and the things that you lived through. Warm us up a little bit with talking about his early childhood, where you grew up, and what he was like as a kid and living with him.
Well, we grew up in Des Moines, and he was involved in sports and all kinds of academic side things, such as student council, and he would do things for society. I mean, he would do things to help. He would do things to raise money for causes.
So he's a good kid.
Absolutely.
And he had great grades.
Yes.
So as life went on, did you ever see any warning signs and things might be going wrong? Or when did the first real time of stress happen with you, knowing that there was a problem?
I think as he entered junior high, I had a feeling that we were going to have some issue down the road, but I thought it would be more of stubbornness. He was pretty bullheaded, which is my half, but I thought maybe we would butt heads there. I didn't really ever think it would be an addiction. When
the addiction started, what was your relationship like with your son? When you started to know there was a problem?
I found a bong in his room. He was probably 14. And I know he'd been to some parties, but I didn't really have any reason to intervene at that time because he really didn't give me any reason outside of finding that to get involved in his extracurricular activities. After I found that, I did address it, and he laughed at me and laughed at me. And he said, I knew you'd find that, and he had made it, and it was very well made, so I knew it wasn't the first time. And I talked to some people about it, and they said, Lisa, it's just pot. I understand that, but I didn't want it to lead into anything further.
When did you get an idea it did lead to something further?
He was probably in high school, and his grades never did suffer, but his lack of interest in school started to. He was bored. He didn't want to go. The challenge was over. He said, I'm not going to use this later on in life. He did continue to go to school, and he did graduate, but pushing him through that was difficult.
Now, in the end, how would you describe sort of the last connection you had with him? Talking about his passing maybe, and how, when life unraveled, did you start to see things in a perspective as a mom?
I think when he came back from his last treatment, which would have been in January of 2017, we didn't speak when he came back into town, and I knew he was in town. I'd heard he was in town. And I had heard that he was staying somewhere, and it was probably Mother's Day, I believe, that he contacted me, as he always did. Every Mother's Day, it was the first message I would get was always from him. And we started to talk a little bit, and he said, I'm doing good. I'm getting my driver's license. I'm looking at a job. I'm staying not too far from your house. I went and saw him. I took him a pizza. His little brother and I took him a pizza one night, and he didn't look good to me. He was thin. He put on a good front, but I know the real Tanner. So as the summer went on, I knew where he was staying wasn't the greatest place either, and he had been to my house. The last time I saw him alive was July 13th. He came over to the house, and he was in bad shape, and that was the worst I'd ever seen him. And at that point, I knew we had to do something, or things were going to end up the way they did.
Now, you were quite active in trying to get him to have help, to get him into treatment,
yes,
things like that. When we come back from the break, let's touch on that and sort of learn what it's like to be a mom in a position to have to care for a son that's growing up and facing these challenges.
Okay.
When we return, we'll continue our conversation about the love and loss of Tanner Blakemore. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
My dad thinks he can fix anything, but at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Watching your sister go through withdrawal is the last thing you expect to do. You hope she gets past it, but worry she'll relapse. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
That's 2 out of 3.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Lisa Moore about the joys of raising a wonderful son and how that can become a challenge, and finally what she faced at the end of her son's battle with addiction. Welcome back, Lisa. Tell us a little bit about that journey when you really started to have to become a mom again and get involved in his life to try and help him with his addiction. You guys weren't always in the same state even, but you were always there for him.
Right. He called me one day and said, "Mom, I need my Social Security card. I'm going to treatment in Florida." First I'd heard of it. He always had to have everything packed just so. When he was like a girl, he would have 3-4 suitcases for an overnight trip. So when he showed up on my doorstep with a duffel bag and wanted a Social Security card, it dawned on me that I realized it was serious. So he flew. We flew him down to Florida, and he was in a treatment center there, and I became active with the counselor, the drug counselor down there, and he tried to do weekly meetings. We would hook up a time where we'd be all on a conference call and get involved in his recovery at that point.
And you were still working up here.
Correct.
How old was he at the time?
21-ish.
And what do you do for a living?
Him?
No, what do you do for a living?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I run an in-home daycare, state licensed.
What a very interesting contrast to be caring for
It
young
was,
children.
because it was hard for me to stop what I was doing during the day to take his call with the drug counselor. And we kind of clashed sometimes because he said, "Mom, you're so busy." I'm at work, and they didn't work during the evenings. The counselors didn't, so it was hard to get a phone call at that time.
And how long was he in treatment down there?
I would say 2 years off and on. He did 2 or 3 different treatment programs. He went into sober living at one point. I thought he was doing fairly well, but when he came back here, it appears that maybe he wasn't doing as well as I thought.
What kind of relationship do you have with conversations with him about it? Was he open? Did he recognize he really had a problem that needed some work?
Towards the end, the last probably 9 months of his life, things were really rough between him and I. I stopped enabling altogether. He had come back, we flew him back for Christmas. His sister and I did, as a birthday gift for him. We brought him back, and he was so excited to be here. And that would be the last Christmas that we saw him alive. There was a big falling out at Christmas because we thought he had gotten high. And he took off Christmas Day, and we didn't see him again until when he came back the following January.
So you talked about stopping enabling him.
Correct.
That's got to be a tough line. You're a mom.
There's a very fine line between continuing to love your child and support their sobriety, but not enabling. At some point, you almost have to, in order to help them, it automatically enables them a little bit.
So they know they can lean on you.
Right.
What about the rest of your family through all this process? What did they know was going on? His siblings?
My oldest daughter, which was the next sibling down from him, they were about 1.5 years apart, 2 years apart. She knew very well what was going on. I didn't really bring the rest of my family in on it. They would ask how he was doing. I think they knew ultimately that he wasn't doing great. But the younger siblings, they did never know there was an issue.
And in the end, you decided that after going through all of this and losing your son, you really wanted to help do something so that other people might not have to go through this.
Right. I feel like by bringing his story to light, or if we can just save one person's life, then his death will certainly have a little bit of purpose.
Do you have conversations about that with your children today?
Absolutely.
What is that like?
They know now, and my kids range from age 6 up to 16, the ones that are still at home. There's 5 of them. And they all know what he died from. They still ask questions. They asked me if he knew the drug he was taking and what it was. They've asked me multiple things about his death, and I'm honest.
How did you find out that he was dead?
I got a phone call. We were at the campgrounds, and I got a phone call from his stepsister, and it was at 5:37 at night. I was making a relish tray for a picnic. She said, "Tanner's OD'd in my bathroom, and the paramedics are on their way." She was kind of panicking. I was instantly mad because we had just talked that morning about having him committed. And my plan was to call Monday to have him committed. I wanted to get a hold of his dad. And I said, "Let me know what happens when the paramedics get here." And I hung up the phone. And then it dawned on me, my kid just overdosed. And I called her back, and she was hysterical. And her boyfriend was working on him. And he was screaming, "I don't know how hard to push." And she was asking me, and I said, "Bust his chest, just bust his chest." And that's when I realized that it was serious and we had to go.
And then what'd you do?
I contacted his dad, and I ran outside and left my kids with the neighbors. I jumped in my car with my fiance, and we flew all the way to the hospital. His dad got there before I did, and he contacted me and said, "They can't find an open airway." And I'm screaming, "Trach him, why aren't they traching him?" And I'm in the car, mind you. And he said, "They're taking him to Methodist Hospital. Meet me there." So we beat the ambulance there. We got there, and the chaplain started coming out, and I backed up. I just remember looking at him, and I backed away from him, and I said, "I don't want to talk to you." And he said, "What?" And I said, I don't want to see you." And he said, "I'm not here to give you news. I'm here to transport communication back and forth from the doctors." And so he took us back into a little room, and at that point I'd called his sister, and she was in Boone. She had flown. She drove in. They put us all in a little room right next to the resuscitation room, and they took us back to see him, and he was naked on the resuscitation table. The big machine was hitting him, bringing his body up. I mean, every time it would hit. The trauma team was working on him intensely. I couldn't even look at the machines. I was watching the trauma team's faces, and one of them had her hand in his groin, and she'd get a pulse, and then she'd lose a pulse. And she'd say, "I've got a pulse," and then they'd lose a pulse. And we walked out of the room, and I sat down in the little room, and the doctor came out, and he said, "We've been working on him for over a half an hour. His pH level is at a 6.5. He said, "I've never seen anyone recover lower than a 6.9. And he said, "We can keep going." And I didn't realize what he was saying to me. And his dad looked at me and said, "Lisa, we have to make a decision." And I said, "What do you mean?" And then I realized. So we got up and we walked in the resuscitation room, and the doctor said his brain's starting to swell. And he said, "At this point, if we get a pulse, that's all he's going to be, is a pulse." And so I hung my head and I said, "Let him go."
Thank you for sharing. We'll take a break right now. When we come back from the break, we'll talk more about Lisa's experiences, coping with the pain and loss, and ultimately the potential for hope and what she's doing to help other people and keep them from going through the same experience. You don't want to miss this. We'll see you after the break.
You wouldn't walk through the halls of your school naked. Yet without thinking, many teens sext explicit photos of themselves to friends using cell phones, never thinking it'll go further. But once you hit send, you're exposed. You're out there in cyberspace for everyone to see. Sexting, it's dumb, it's dangerous, and it's against the law.
My mom thinks hashtags are something you eat with eggs. She legit has a meltdown every time her phone updates. Last week, she asked me to explain chat snap. So of course, she chose the absolute wrong internet provider, and now we have the slowest internet ever.
Escape Planet Slow and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're with Lisa Moore, telling her story and the story of her son, Tanner. She hopes, as we do, that by reaching out, she can help someone somewhere avoid the same experience. During the break, you were telling us how difficult that first year was. Mm-hmm. And that every month it just came back and gripped you.
Mm-hmm. Every month right before the day of his death.
Yeah. And now your daughter in the second year is having similar issues.
Right. The second year for her has been worse than the first. I had a harder time with the first year. Every first holiday, the 19th of every month, the birthday. The first year was rough. Not that the second year isn't, but now that the first are over, you kind of learn to live with the fact that he's gone. You accept it, I think, a little better.
How about your friends and family? How are they in helping with the grieving process?
Everyone has been extremely supportive. There's been times I've had to take off work, for example, to be here today, and everyone has supported that 100%.
So now you're doing stuff, like coming here.
Right.
And talking to groups. And I know you did some great stuff with the trailer about what you don't see. Tell us about the stuff that you're doing to try and help reach out and use your inner strength to help guide other people through maybe tough times like this.
Well, kind of a funny story. Tanner he was a jokester, and he always wanted a Harry Potter wand and joked about it all the time. And so I had gotten him one while he was in his last treatment facility, and I never had a chance to give it to him. So at his funeral, I stood up and I read a letter, and I said, he's going to change the world with this one day, because that's what he used to say. He wanted the wand to change the world. And I placed it in his hands at the funeral. So by doing that, I'm hoping that his story can reach someone, can save a life, and maybe give his death a little purpose. We did the trailer with Shauna Isaac. She was a production manager for What You Don't See.
And tell them a little bit about what the trailer does for people.
What You Don't See is taken across the state of Iowa to teach parents with their heads in the sand who have no clue what they're looking for, as well as law enforcement, hiding places, little signs to look for. And inside the trailer is a teenager's bedroom that shows multiple places that drugs or paraphernalia could be kept.
And this is important because parents need to look at these things? I mean, you know, sometimes a kid's room is a quote-unquote safe place in their eyes.
Right. I don't think it's ever too soon to go through your kid's room, and I understand that that upsets the kids. They think you're invading their privacy. But if you don't look, you don't know. And by not knowing, you never know how the outcome's going to be.
What do you think motivates kids to start taking risks like that?
I think pressure of wanting to be popular, wanting to hang out with the cool kids. And I think, I don't really know a teenager yet that hasn't tried to smoke pot. But I also believe that that's, to me, it's a starter drug. It lets them know that there is something available that lets them know that they can do something to feel a different way.
So you don't think it's a good idea for parents to think their kids should smoke pot?
Absolutely not.
Well, thank you. After the break, we'd like to have you share some advice for parents.
Okay.
And talk about things you believe they need to do to keep their homes safe.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. We'll come back and ask Lisa to share some insights and advice that may help you understand and face the challenge of addiction in your home and family. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. Right through there.
You have to help her! Help her!
Hey, Sam, can you hear me? Looks like an overdose. Do you know what she was taking?
She doesn't do drugs. Her friends don't do drugs.
No. Listen, we're just trying to save your daughter's life. Any idea? Hey, listen.
Going to the movies, son. See you later.
Bye, Sam. Sam, wake up!
Sharing. I mean, I don't mind it when there's enough to go around. Toys with Charlie? Okay. My mint ice cream? Fine. Our slow internet with my whole family at the same time? That's pushing a man too far.
Get unlinked and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
I thought texting friends on her cell phone was harmless.
But there she is, our daughter, topless for everyone to see.
I'm so embarrassed for her. I can't even imagine what she must be feeling. How did this happen?
What was she thinking?
Someone sent our teenage son a photo of a naked classmate. If he forwards it, it's a crime.
Our son committing a crime? I had no idea.
And he could be labeled a sex offender.
Tell your teen, sexting is a crime.
My dad thinks he can fix anything. But at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. This is a favorite part of the show. We invite our guest, Lisa, to share some insights and advice with us. Pay close attention. It could make a difference in your life and the life of someone you love. Lisa, this is a chance for you to speak out. You know, there are a lot of issues, but what do you think are some of the things parents really need to get about the world their kids are growing up in today?
Well, I think that today, in this world we live in, everyone thinks that legalizing pot is a great idea, and I'm not saying it's not, but it's definitely not a good choice for a young adult who's just getting started in the world. I believe it's definitely for someone older whose life is stable, if that's how they want to use it. But I don't think that just because your child smokes pot and that's all they do, I don't think that that's okay. I don't think that's a good idea to continue to let that happen. And I do also think that if you think your child needs help and you're afraid to commit them or afraid to get them help for the fact that they will be angry or upset with you, I think that you would much rather get them help on this side of the earth than be mad at yourself when they're 6 feet under.
So basically, kids shouldn't be doing
No,
alcohol,
intervene.
tobacco,
Intervene
yeah.
in your kid's life. Get involved. Know what they're doing at all times. Know where they're at the party. Walk into the party. What are they doing? Know who their friends are.
Now, you know this firsthand.
Absolutely.
And you brought Tanner here with you today.
I did.
What would Tanner say today if he could be here?
Tanner would say, "I'm sorry, Mom." But he would say, "Keep fighting."
So it's important for people to know that you never give up on your kids.
Never.
It's got to be so hard for you.
It is. Some days are harder than others, but you know, at the end of the day, it's real, and heroin is real, and it's out there, and it's available. So you don't ever want to assume and just brush it off as an assumption. If you think there's even a hint of a sign, you definitely want to get involved.
Do you have places you know that you could recommend for parents to go to get help?
I do. Covert Action in Des Moines offers, Dr. Covert has a program that it's an intense treatment program. It is outpatient. There aren't any inpatient detox centers here in Iowa for our addicts, but he will get help. There is primary health care on Euclid that Dr. Bollinger practices at. There is help. There is help.
And besides the resources that we'll put on and the credits for the show, they can
Right.
always go to healthyiowa.org
Right.
and get some of this information too. One final word for our guests. One thing for them to take home from today, what would it be?
Love your children and don't ever give up. And I think as soon as you stop enabling, you will see a change in your child, but you will also not have as many regrets as when they're gone, if they're gone. You won't have that regret that you helped put them there. Get them help.
We know that a parent can do everything right,
Mhm.
and things can still go wrong.
Right.
And I appreciate you sharing your message today.
Thanks.
Okay. And thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Appreciate that. And thank you for joining us on Surviving Bad. Keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode, where we'll explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration.
If you or someone you care about are looking for help with treatment or recovery, there is help out there. Please visit these sites.